Good evening. Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, and if you like what we are up to, then you can follow us a bit more at becomecgpro.com. So tonight we have a very special guest. He's a good friend of mine, Punn. Welcome, Punn Wiantrakoon. Welcome to the CG Pro podcast.
Thanks,
I
Ed.
am going to do a very quick intro, and then please feel free to fill in the gaps. But Punn is a filmmaker, is a very talented filmmaker, makes his own movies, but he's also worked at many of the big studios in the world in visual effects. He's spent a good amount of time at Disney working on some of their brilliant feature animations and worked on things like Jurassic World and Mandalorian. Jungle Book is where we met and worked on that movie. You can also find him potentially at Amazon Studios these days. And yeah, I'll leave it there with the risk of butchering it anymore and let you fill in the gaps. But Punn, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me, man. I don't do this for anybody. You're a very special person. That's why I'm here. So I hope to learn something from you. Let's do it.
Let's go. All
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
So
You go ahead, please.
I always love at the beginning of this to ask kind of beginning questions like what got you into this mess in the first place? How did you find filmmaking, visual effects? What were some early inspirations that made you feel like you wanted to get into this and do this for a living?
Oh, um, cool. Well, you want to start from the very beginning.
From
Interesting.
day one, yes.
Yeah. So this is funny. I was just talking to my wife about this. Like we were talking about our childhood, and I don't remember much about my childhood, but what I remember is me laying around with my brother, like laying on the floor, drawing pictures and reading comic books. So that's all I remember growing up as a kid, drawing and reading comic books. Um, for the longest time, I wanted to be a comic book artist because I didn't even think making movies is a thing, you know. I didn't think because I grew up in Thailand, so like making a movies for Disney ILM is just not a possibility. So and then we finally moved to the U.S. when I was 12, and all throughout my childhood, my high school years, all I did was play video games, play video games and drew pictures. And then I was a horrible student, man. I hated everything. I hated going to school. I hated, yeah. So after school, after high school, I was just working at a restaurant as a waiter. And then one day, my buddy said like, "Hey, I'm gonna go take this road trip to go check out the school. You want to come with me?" I didn't have anything better to do, so I went. So I was living in Virginia at the time, so we are going to Pittsburgh, and he was going to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh to check out the graphic design program. And when I got there, I saw that they had a program called computer animation, which is use computer to do artsy stuff and animate it, and you work in video games. I was like, I didn't even know that existed. That's a weird thing. This is back in 1995. Yeah, so I didn't know such a degree existed. And I knew I wanted to be an artist. I knew I wanted to be like some sort of artist, but I didn't think it was good enough to be a comic book artist. And then so I thought like there's got to be a way that I can combine all my love of movies, comic books, drawing, computers, video games. That's what this whole thing is, man. This the stuff that we do every day is literally a combination of all those things. So um, so I took some classes. I took a I took their course for about 9 months until I ran out of money and I had to drop out. So I went to Barnes and Noble and got 3D Studio Max for Dummies book, and and I learned 3ds Max. Actually, I'm sorry, I take it back. Back then it was probably 3D Studio released 4 on
Yeah.
DOS, even before Max. Um, and that's it. That's how I got that. So I taught myself, made a demo reel. A friend of mine that went to school with me was working at on Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, and finally they had an opening. Like we're looking for a modeler. I wanted to be an animator at the time, but I knew how to model. So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So I just spent like a couple of weekends hardcore creating a modeling demo reel, and I got my first gig. You can probably see my poster right there. It's kind of dark, but that's
Yeah.
actually a poster of Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow.
Oh,
That was
amazing.
my first movie, and that was back in 2003, 19 years ago. That's kind of scary how old we are.
Yeah, it's real.
um, oh, Jackie said she worked on that movie too. That's right. I think we talked about that. And so I've been in the industry ever since in all sort of roles. I started off as a modeler, and then after a while, I got a job at Image Movers Digital, where I was working in the art department as a CG concept artist for a while, and then I went to do some Previz work with Halon and Unit 11. That was so much fun. I loved working in Previz because I feel like that's where like the filmmaking happens. Because I spent so long making assets, like doing work in the front end, but like working in Previz, you work with the directors, you read the script, and you're like, how would this look like? What would this look like in the movies? Um, so that I feel like ever since then, like it really got me into filmmaking. I thought about filmmaking more holistically as opposed to before. And like, I just like making assets. I just like modeling or texturing or even animating. But I feel like Previous really is a combination of a lot of those skills and more, and a lot of traditional skills, pacing, editing, animating, shot design, all of those things. Um, and then after that, I landed at Disney Animation for a while. And I think during at my time at Disney is when Unreal started like getting popular. I think when Kite Boy came out, that's
Mm.
what right? Is that right? Kite Boy was like the first thing that like, and I think that's about the time when they made Unreal free. So I just saw like, oh man, you can do all sorts of fun stuff with this, and I started diving deeper into it. And funny enough, when in the beginning of like right before the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, I was already in Unreal. I was like, into it quite a bit. I was visiting my buddy up in San Francisco, Landis Fields, who I don't know if you know him. He works at ILM. We went out to lunch. It's like, dude, how are you liking Disney? Do you have any desire to jump ship and do something else? And I was like, interesting. And then he said like, you should come work at ILM with me, doing all this Unreal stuff, doing virtual production, working the volume, creating content, and it kind of blew my mind because like I've already been thinking about that, but like not. It was just a coincidence that he was already doing it, I was doing it. We lost touch for a while. We got back together, and he's already doing it at the highest level, and he was just looking for someone else, and he brought me in, and that's how I ended up at ILM. I worked on one season of Mandalorian season 3, and then after that, um, a friend of mine over at Amazon was looking for someone else. So I just thought it was a great opportunity and great time to move on, and here we are.
That brings us up to the present day.
Yeah, I totally missed the part about when we worked on the Jungle Book together, and that was virtual production, but I guess in a different form back then, a little bit different, but it was still quite virtual and a
Yeah,
production. Yeah,
yeah, arguably virtual production, but not in an
I feel
LED
like it
volume.
was fully
Mm.
just not just in a different form, different,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and then yeah, again, Lion King after that, different form, and
Yeah, yeah.
Mandalorian after that, different form again.
And I wonder, dude, in like 5 years, what is it going to be like? They're going to be like, oh, like, look at all those LED panels in the dumpsters. What are we going to do with all those things? Because now we have, I don't know, XYZ.
It's going to be holographic volumetric
Right. I was
projection
thinking
where
the
you're,
same thing.
yeah,
Holographic, photoreal holographic stuff. Can you imagine, man? Yeah, no more. You don't need a full stage, a full volume, all that electricity. Um,
yeah.
I should be reeling that back because now I'm talking against my own best interest.
Talking yourself out of a job.
Yeah,
Science fiction becomes reality.
yeah. Um,
So, yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. You know, you talked about uh, childhood dreams coming true, essentially trying to figure out seeing some what you saw as limitations at the time. You're in a country and an age and a skill set that you didn't feel like it was a possibility for you, and
Right.
look at you now.
Hey, look at me now. You know what? I attribute it all to. I attribute it all to the fact that I get bored very easily. So
Right.
whatever job I'm doing, I'm like, ooh, look at that new cool thing. Let's learn it real quick. And then like, it'd be awesome if someone pays me to do this for a living. And then I do it. And then I was like, ooh, look at that new thing.
Right.
So but
Curiosity.
yeah, curiosity for sure. And just yeah, wanting to learn the pleasure of learning and finding things out and just doing it. I'm never bored because there's always more stuff to learn and more stuff to do. So
How
if
did
any,
how did it? Sorry, go ahead.
no, if anything, it hurts. It's annoying. I wish I can just sit around and play video games and enjoy myself, but I can't because my brain just keeps running like, dude, you should be doing this. What are you doing playing video games? So
I feel the same way. So how did it feel when you got that like early glimpse of feeling like you kind of knew what you wanted to do? What did it
it's
feel like?
it's oh man, that's a great question because it's I don't want to say cliche and it's like it's just awesome, whatever, but it felt like I finally have something to focus on because like I said, I was such a bad student, but it's because I didn't have any interest. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I guess I mean I pursued art, but honestly, to become what a professional fine artist or a photographer or it was fun, but it just didn't sound like a job to me. So when I found out that there's this thing, computer animation, this because I love computers, I love techie stuff, I love art, I love video games. That's when I found out about that culmination of all those things that I love that you can actually make a living out of. There's no feeling like it. Um, and with that said, I always tell people, students, friends, whoever asks me questions, strangers on the bus, that you just got to throw a lot of stuff at the wall until something hits,
Yeah.
um, because something will hit, and you're because you never know what you're gonna like until you do it, until you do it and try it, and once you do it for a while, like, oh, this is fun. I mean, I've tried a bunch of things that didn't quite work out that I enjoyed, but not that I would want to make a living out of. For the longest time, also, I thought I wanted to be a photographer, but then I was like, and then my interest waned, and then moved on to this thing. But like CG and filmmaking has just been that rock, solid the whole time for the past 20, 30, 25 years. So I'm so grateful and thankful that I found it. It's one of
Mm.
those things. You know how people always joke around, they're like, I hate my job. Oh, who doesn't hate their jobs? Everybody hate their job. Like I don't hate my job at all. I love my job. I you
That's
know
awesome.
Sometimes it's stressful, sometimes but most of the times it's rewarding, and most of the times, I get paid way too much to do fun shit that um I'm just so grateful, and it just feels so lucky that I found that one thing. So I don't know if that answered your question at all. I just babbled on
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
No, it definitely, yeah. I mean, I think it's just really interesting to hear because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are trying to figure out what to do and or they know what to do and they don't think that they can accomplish it, or they're doing something they love but they see something else that's maybe even more exciting. And I think it like just having that it's inspiring to hear someone else talking about that journey, talking about how you found it. It's not just I think a lot of people see people that are in the position where they do something they love and being successful at it and think that they fell into that position and were just lucky or that it was given to them or that there's some weird alien that has special skills. Um, yeah, it's really useful and inspiring, I think, to hear that you found it by the process of elimination to a great
Mhm.
extent of trying a bunch of stuff that didn't stick and finding things that excited you and following them and pursuing that curiosity, but following something that really spoke to you and
Right.
not following the other things that maybe think you thought you should do or society thought you should do. You followed your own intuition.
And honestly, it's so much fun that it's one of those things where even if I didn't get paid to do this, I would probably still do it just for fun. just to make pretty pictures, make pretty videos, movies, just for my own satisfaction. And yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
that's fantastic. I mean, I think it's, yeah, just for our listeners, I think there's a lot of people who are wanting to get into the industry, people who are in the industry. Um, and I found this actually in the middle of my career in the industry as well, that whilst I felt for a good long time like I'd found something exactly the same thing, I felt super lucky. I would have been doing it anyway. I just felt incredibly lucky. And then I found this moment where I didn't feel that same way about it anymore. And I felt really crushed because I'd already left one industry and got into this one. And I had that kind of this moment in the middle where I had this dip where I felt like maybe I'll go do something else. And it
When was that?
actually,
How long ago was that?
um, I'd say it was probably about 8, 9 years ago, maybe somewhere
So
around there.
that's at right after Jungle Book or before?
Just before. It was before.
Okay,
Yeah.
before. Okay.
Yeah.
You feel like you were burning out from the industry. Like you don't feel lucky, grateful to be in where you are anymore, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I think for me, I'd kind of also pushed myself so much at the beginning to make it and get in the door and get the skills. And I worked so hard that I wanted to just take my foot off the gas for a minute and just not like thrust quite so fast for a bit. And I think I did that for a little bit too long, and I wasn't
Yeah.
really pushing it. I wasn't really growing anymore, and I put a lot of it on myself. But then also for me, this new phase that we're in at the moment really kicked it up a notch and made me really excited about it again as well. On
Yeah.
top of that,
I you know how many times how many friends I've had that said the same exact thing, and all the friends around the same that's been in the industry around the same time, because
yeah,
I felt the same exact way. I mean, I was working at Disney Animation. I was a modeler, working on like the highest caliber projects, but I was just going through the motion, and I was like, this is fun and all, but I want more. And then when Unreal came around, um, it made me feel like when I was learning 3D Studio from that book again, where
right,
there's so much stuff that I don't know. I gotta learn all this stuff and make pretty pictures because I know what's possible. I know what people have done, and I know that this thing is free, and I know that the knowledge can be garnered, can be earned, can be gained. So so you see a path, right? And then yeah, it rejuvenated the love for the industry big time.
yeah,
And so many of my buddies at ILM, at Amazon, everywhere, they all felt the same. Like they've worked at ILM at the highest caliber place on the highest caliber movies, and then they're like, it's just another day at the office now. But then when Unreal came around, when they started running virtual production, it's like, holy shit, it's so much fun. Yeah,
made CG fun again.
I know. Yeah, thanks.
um, yeah, totally. Speaking of the passion for what you do, something I've always respected about you a lot as well is that you make your own movies as well, and work on your own projects and directed and produced your own films.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's this is one of those things where I keep thinking like I just keep working at it, and one day it's gonna pay off. One day someone's gonna believe in me enough to give me a big bag of money to go make a movie for them. So it's so close, just a matter of time, Ed. But but thanks,
I
you know what? But I feel like thanks for me. Thank God that I had that passion that for pushing towards that, because all of that experience and all of that knowledge is actually helping me with my current job, helping me with Unreal, helped me with Previz, helped me with a lot of my day-to-day job because of that hobby, that passion on the side.
how tell us how it helps you.
Okay. So I've always been interested in photography. So knowing photography and knowing how the mechanics of a camera works and how light works and f-stop, aperture, shutter speed, and then that easily translate into cinematography, right? Because I mean, photography is basically cinematography, but on a moving platform. Um, so knowing all that and knowing filmmaking language, about everything, pacing, editing, story development, all of those things really helped with the Previz process. So you can communicate with a filmmaker, you can communicate with the directors in their own language. So when they said, I don't know, like, let's dolly this thing over here and take it down by 2 stops, bring up rim light over here, and then just like cut it, make it snappier, use this objective camera, all of those nerd film talk that I feel like I love, but I can communicate with them in their own language, because they don't need to learn our language. We need to learn their language because we're supporting them. So same with on in virtual production on the Mandalorian, like speaking with, because I have to deal a lot with DP and production designers, so just feel like seeing the bigger picture, seeing the end product, seeing the finished film, as opposed to piecemeal. This asset, this is my asset. I'm just gonna work on this asset. I don't care about anything else. Like, you no longer can think that way. You have to think of a whole cohesive world, and with all the players involved. You can't just like work in a silo. Now you have to work with the DP. You have to think like, how are we going to lay out this set so that the DP can shoot it properly and tell his story, and then the production designer can build certain things or not build certain things, and how this whole thing makes sense to support the director's vision. I feel like when I'm making all these environments in the VAD, I try to think of myself as the director. Like, how would I want this thing to be built, as opposed to there's a concept art, make it look just like that. The end.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to the start of what you were saying there, that it seems like your love of film and making your own films and being able to understand what those roles actually are really helped you in this industry, because in this new way you have to communicate with those people more directly. We used to be shut off from them in visual effects mostly, but now
Right.
we're connecting with them a lot more in virtual production. It's part of the fun for me, for sure.
Yeah. Totally.
But understanding it, having walked down that path a little bit and shot movies and held cameras and being able to talk that language is,
Mhm.
so that's really helped you in being able to work in this business.
Greatly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100% greatly. I feel like visual effects have become so, like, not has become, it's always been like assembly line, right? They just grab you from the street, plug you at this thing, you just do this thing. A lot of times you don't even know what you're making. You're just working on this one little shot or this little asset. And you see the whole thing and you're like, oh man, if I would have known this whole sequence looks like this, I would have thought about things a little bit differently. Yeah.
Right.
So, yep, seeing the forest rather than the trees.
How would you um what would you recommend to people if they're trying to get into virtual production? Say somebody who's starting out, who's in the position where they're interested, something's piqued their interest and they want to take it further.
Well, when you say get into virtual production, I feel like I get that questions all the time.
Yeah.
That's
Let's say the VAD then.
oh, okay.
Let's
Hey.
keep it more specific, seeing as
No,
that's
I
where
mean,
you.
honestly, because I do hear that question a lot. People see behind the scene Mandalorian, LED wall, the volume, all that. Like, I want to do that. Like, what do you want to
Yeah.
do? So, because there's so much, right? There's the mocap side of things, the operating the engine, the creating the VAD, the filmmaking itself. So, but let's just stick to the VAD, just because that's what I know best. I feel like you really have to have almost like a generalist mindset.
Mm.
So to be able to model, texture, assemble, compose a whole set, and light the set. Um, and the tricky thing about this is that you also have to be somewhat technically savvy
Mm.
to know the software itself. Unreal is a beast, as you know. I mean, you teach these things, and I'm sure you still pull your hair out sometimes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Drop in a new version every 10
Yeah,
minutes. Yeah.
right. And the tricky thing about it is the fact that it's a software meant for something else entirely that we're just shoehorning into this filmmaking tool. So people that come from VFX, like, I feel like, okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean people that come from. I personally, I came from VFX, so I have a certain mindset. Like you're used to things working a certain way, and then when you're working in Unreal, I'm like, well, that's different. So you just import things in, but you can't really manipulate this thing. It's just a different mindset. So, but to work in the VAD, because you would the you are basically a generalist using Unreal. That's all it is. So
Yeah.
you just have to have all of those knowledge, all that skill set. I know that in a bigger team, it would get broken up into somewhat specialized, like someone would maybe laying out the scene and then hand it off to the lighter, and the lighter would take care of lighting and a lot of light baking, all the technicalities of it. But so all in all, I feel like you can't just be a modeler, a texture artist, a lighter, a rigger. Like you just have to be um, and you have to embody that generalist mindset. You have to think about the end product, the whole thing, as a whole. So you just have to know a DCC, you have to know a texturing program, and just learn traditional lighting practice to see what makes a shot looks good, and try to replicate that. I feel like that's the advice that I always give people. Learn how Unreal lighting works, the tool, learn the tool set, learn the technicality, and then go try to replicate what the masters have done and try your
Right.
best. You know,
So, um, do you think there's a particular path people can take? Can they step straight in, straight out of school into a VAD, depending on the skill set that they have?
yeah, I think if you're a good modeler, texture artist, and you know Unreal Engine, you can. That I think that's the easiest path
Right.
because, but then again, I mean, a lot of times there are so much assets out there, not like pre-made assets, like Megascans, Sketchfab, Turbo Squids, whatever. So one could possibly just don't know how to model textures at all, just know Unreal, assemble a set together, know how to light, have that artistic eye, and can still get in as a strong lighter
Right.
into a bigger VAD team that you can be when you where you can be specialized.
So the bigger VAD teams are more akin to the traditional VFX a bit. Like you'll have a
A
bit more
little bit more
specialism,
so,
but
yeah.
still should be a generalist,
Right.
ideally.
Yeah. I yeah, definitely. And you should just have a good eye. I mean, that's such a weird thing to say. You have to have a good eye. How do you get that, Ed? You're a teacher. How do you learn how to have a
Yeah.
good eye?
Just
What are
beat it into
your thoughts
people.
on that? What's that?
I asked the same question when I got my first job. I wanted a job in commercials because I wanted to be a generalist. I wanted to go through tons of different stuff really fast. And I wanted a great mentor. And I asked my first mentor, an amazing 3D artist, Sean Elliott in London. I said, how people keep talking about photorealism? How do you do that? It was a sort of dumbly asked question, maybe, but he just said, I was a computer programmer, but right before that, I'd done several artistic things in my life. I was a computer programmer. I needed to condition my eye. I needed to find out what that meant, to your
Yeah.
question. And like really a combination of learn, like for me, well, his answer to that was start with photography, try and emulate what is real. Like start with
Mhm.
what is real, use that as reference, use it in your texturing, use it in your lights, use it as many places you can, and you'll get something to look as real as you can. But study great people, like you said, try and replicate things that look great. And for me as well, having that mentor, somebody who would tell me when something was not good enough, um, repeatedly for years was really important. It kind of chiseled all the rough edges off for me.
Yeah,
That really helped. But just experience and learning from the right people. That was the time and the right mentor.
that's true. You know what? That's a great point. I feel like just being surrounded by top-notch people, you can't help but be better,
Yeah,
right? Because you see what they do day in day out, and then you bring your power turd to the table. You, they're gonna laugh at you. So now you have to, but you have to be able to absorb that and see why yours is not good
Yep.
and know how to fix it. Because
Right.
if that's not the case, then the eye is
Yeah.
not there. Yeah.
Yeah. Part of your eye is your attitude. So
Yeah.
it's not just having an actual eye. You
Right.
have to be coachable. You have to take criticism and not take it personally, and want to do better, and want to strive for more, want to constantly grow, and want to take, sometimes unpleasant feedback,
Yeah.
and take it on the chin and say, okay, yeah, that's fair. I remember handing my first pieces of work in and just getting some reactions like, what on earth have you done here? Which
Yeah.
is not very nice. But yeah, I mean, in that process, I learned not to do that over time.
I agree.
Yeah,
But I feel like it goes back to what we were saying earlier about being curious. I feel like
yeah,
you bring the work and then we're like, this is trash, go try it again. But you should be able to say, why is it trash? Can you tell me how to make it better?
yeah.
Or why is yours so good? Why this why do when do I look at your beautiful picture, why doesn't it hurt my eyeballs? Like why do it does it give me the pleasant feeling? And I feel like with the right person, they would tell you like, well, it's because of this composition, this, the way this thing looks. Um, yeah. So I feel like when you're curious and you try to be better and you ask questions and you kind of like being little forceful about it, like, tell me how to be better. Tell me why this sucks. I feel like that helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is great advice. Um, we got a couple of questions coming in here, so I can bring one or two of those up. Um,
All of them, every single one.
all okay, let's go. All right, strap in. So here's one. When and where, how, and when are VAD and traditional art department crossing paths and working together on productions?
Did you say where, how, and when,
Yes.
and
Where,
who?
how,
What?
and when.
Okay.
Okay, maybe who too.
Well, I can talk to that a little bit, I guess. Um, so both the art department and the virtual art department, in a in most movies that I've worked in or TV series, work underneath the production designer. So the production designers had like, they design the whole thing, or they have a team that designs it. And then he said, like, when you're working the volume specifically, I guess, I think the virtual art department would create the whole thing in a rough form, just so we can block out the scene. And then we'd say like, okay, where should the volume go? Let's put the volume here. Like, and once that's been decided, like, okay, the volume is right here. We've built the whole thing. Now we can decide what we're going to build practically and what's going to be built digitally. A lot of times, the virtual art department assets inform the traditional art department, and a lot of times it's vice versa. So a lot of times we would build, like, let's say you take this room for an example. If I want that back wall to be virtual and the rest to be practical, so maybe the practical ones would be built first, and then we would either go scan it or we use it as reference to build the last wall, to build the content. That way they will marry each other seamlessly. But sometimes it's the other way around. The virtual art department would get the assets first. They get to it, and we build all the virtual assets, and then we would print it out in like 3D printed, or the art department would use it as reference to build their practical sets. So we work together pretty closely, and a lot of times it's not that cut and dry either. A lot of times it goes back and forth even a couple of times. So, but traditionally, the VAD would block out rough environments. We find the volume location, and then once that's locked in, then we upres everything to the final pixel while the art department create their practical based on our artwork, or we and vice versa. That didn't
What is
answer any questions.
It was amazing. It was a perfect. Um, what's a typical day like for you in the VAD? Can you talk about some of the things that you'd be doing?
um, so depending on where we are in the production, so some I can't get too specific, but
Yeah.
I'll give you like a few different scenarios of a typical day. So a typical day may be, hey, there's a script of the show that they might want to shoot in the volume. So let's help them out to try to create something and inform some decisions. So I might just go in and block out in the environment and then like put the volume in and then see like, okay, how can we make this work? And like what should we build practically, what should we build digitally, how are we going to hide the seams, um, and then does it make sense to do this, like will this even fit in the volume what we're trying to do, or is the volume too big, how much set will we have to build, will it be cost effective? So this is like super early. Most of the times I would just use blocks or grab Megascan assets or whatever assets from that's pre-made.
But you've
And
been
then
doing it in Unreal Engine
in
at this
Unreal
stage.
Engine,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
all of this is done in Unreal Engine.
Yeah.
Little sidebar, I need to jump into the Unreal 5, so the modeling tool, because I don't know if you've messed with it. I
Mm,
haven't touched it at all, but I see its capabilities. So
mm.
I need to get into it because right now I still model stuff in Maya or just use boxes like a sucker. But I've seen how awesome it can be. So
Yeah.
I think that will help me with this phase of the production quite a bit. So that's one phase. And then we present it to the filmmaker. We do a little video walk around, or we just do some screenshots, and they look at it and like, cool, let's do it. Or no, man, that's gonna be too expensive. It doesn't make any sense. Whatever it is. So that's one way. Another is another day, which is like takes up most of the times, is that we have a new episode of a TV series that we're working on. And the production designer said, this is the set that we need. Let's build it out. So we would go from concept art or some art department 3D files, build it out in Unreal using, again, build it from scratch using photogrammetry, LiDAR scan, laser scan, or pre-made assets, or whatever way we can is available to us. So we build that, we light it, we make it beautiful, present it to the production designer. He says that sucks. I said, why? Tell me why it sucks. And then he'll tell you. And then we adjust and we keep tweaking it, and then it looks pretty. And then we ship it off to a different team where they will optimize it and make it work inside the LED volume. And then the third thing is that other team, that some team to ship me the Unreal load, and I need to optimize it to make sure that it will play well on the wall. It will get 60 frames a second. No, there's no weird flickering. So that and this is the last minute where we throw this set onto the volume and we review it in the volume with the cameras, with the DP, with everybody. Like, this is the final review, final dress rehearsal. Whatever you don't like, tell me now. I'm gonna fix it. But now we actually get to see it in the volume as opposed to in front of a computer, or in VR or whatever it is. Now this is like the final dress rehearsal, and we have from the first time we see it to the time like we actually shoot. There's probably a few weeks, maybe a month or so, that the DP will get a chance to like bring in his practical lights to try to light the set. The art department will bring in their props to make sure that it matches with each other, with the content and the scenic. Everybody will get their inputs. The directors walk by, and then we just make adjustments all the way up until the shoot day. And the whole time while that's happening is also optimization to make sure that everything works technically under the hood.
Right. Do
Well,
you have a team of people doing just optimization,
no,
or does everybody do
I
optimization?
feel like it's not like I would not want to put that on a team. I
No.
feel like everybody should get a little bit of everything, but the optimization people are definitely more technical than others. They know the nitty gritty behind the scene of Unreal more than the generalist artist.
Right. Yeah. Good. Um, yeah, really, really helpful information about how what it's like on the ground. Do you do a lot of photogrammetry yourselves?
I do it, but I do it just for fun. Um, it's it's still time consuming. I feel like I'll bet you, dude, this is one of those things where maybe 2 more years, 3 more years, we're gonna look back in the way we do photogrammetry and we're like, that's silly. I think it can be better. I think that the process could still improve quite a bit. What do you think? I feel like I don't want to see the 50 million settings in reality capture. I just want to give it pictures and it gives me back the perfect thing. The
Oh,
end.
for
Is
sure.
that too
Yeah.
much to ask?
Yep. No,
And
totally. Yeah. I just like optimization. Nobody really wants to make
right.
LODs or
Yeah.
texture pack, or no one really wants to roto, no one really wants to do match move.
Right.
Yeah, I'd happily see that kind of thing go away. Like it maybe more I'm seeing so much progress in machine learning techniques
Right.
coming into production. Maybe that will help in this area too.
Yeah. I mean, if Midjourney can crank out beautiful paintings, why can't we get cloud computing of photogrammetry assets that comes out perfect?
Where
Or
you don't even have to take pictures and have it reconstruct it. You just speak it into 3D Midjourney and say, I
right.
want 10
Now
beautiful
we're getting
rocks.
somewhere. Yes. Yeah. That's so true. All right. Maybe that's a new squirrel we can chase.
It's another business we could start.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, another couple questions here. So someone's saying, are you guys focused more on a previs output, or are you focusing on final content on the wall, or both? Are you guys getting final shots out of Unreal or still using a VFX render solution?
Um, I need to be a little bit vague about what I'm saying, what I'm doing, just because
Talk
I,
about older projects if it helps.
but just all the projects that I've worked on so far, the Unreal stuff has been for Final Pixel.
Mm,
So, but I know that a lot of previous houses, I know Third Floor and Halon use Unreal as for their previous rendering side of things. And I'm sure other places too, but those are just the only two I know for sure. And just because they're faster, prettier, better, go straight into editorial and but for me personally, all the Unreal work that I've done has been for to go onto the wall to be shot Final Pixel. That's the intent. Doesn't mean it's always 100% like that, because
right.
sometimes they just don't work out, but then they just tweak things here and there. So but the intent is for it to be Final Pixel VFX.
Copy that. Um, It's another question here. How much does real life production and filmmaking experience help in a previous role? Is it valued highly or nice to have?
I I
I
think
think
it's
you've
nice.
somewhat answered that already, but
Yeah, I think it's nice to have, but I don't. No, no, no. Like real life production help
yeah,
in previous role. Uh, More, I don't want to say like, hey, just because you've worked on set, it's beneficial. I mean, it is beneficial, but it doesn't really help with your skill set. Like, I feel like rather than having experience working on real life production, it's more like take a camera and go make a movie, and you'll see how much stuff you have goes into making a movie, into thinking about the creative prospect, um, creative perspective of it, as opposed to. So I don't know if that's what the question was asking. If it's like, hey, of work in live action production, is that going to be beneficial for Previz? I don't
yeah,
know.
maybe if it's like a requirement or not, but that sounds like not a
No,
requirement, but it does help in some ways, but it's
correct.
not the be all end all. Someone else asking here a very specific question. What would a demo reel for a previous artist look like, and how would it be different from a previous supervisor?
Are we talking about Previz or are we talking about VAD? Because I can
It's
speak to both, but
yeah,
if we're talking about a previous reel would contain sequences of shots that is of a story nicely told. So you that's what it would look like. It would just be a reel full of awesome sequences of clear storytelling that's exciting and dynamic. Um, the thing about Previous is that most of the shots that we do is action shots. So we're not gonna do like two people sitting around talking and being all dramatic acting. So that's not what Previous is for, obviously. So Previous is more for shots that's hard to visualize on paper. So core action sequence, car chases, dinosaurs fighting each other, that it's just very difficult to film. So we have to plan every single thing out, so that because production days are so expensive that we have to plan everything out to a T, and you use that as a template to start shooting. So a reel full of dynamic, fun, exciting, clear action sequences, I think would make a great previous demo reel.
Cool. Got another question that I think is very similar to one we already asked. Okay, so what's one here that says, "I'd love to know the iterative workflow for Previz these days and how you expect it to evolve moving forwards as the movie making process evolves." So tell us the future.
Huh.
How's it going to be in the future?
We're already living the future, man.
So it's like now,
Yes,
like it is
future
now.
is now. So the iterative process. Is that what the question is?
Love to know the iterative workflow for Previz these days.
Okay. Um, I don't know. You create shots, you get in front of directors, he makes notes, you go back, address the notes, and then rinse and repeat. So I don't know much more beyond that. Sorry. And honestly,
Right.
I've been out of the previous game for a bit for because I've been in VAD and in modeling, but that's what it looked like when we worked in Previz. I can't imagine it's changed because you create a sequence, you show it to directors, he makes notes, he say yeah or nay, and then you adjust and you continue.
Maybe there's a little more speed these days because the Previz is you're able to see it and change it more in real time a bit
But
more.
I guess you're right. Okay, so let's dig down a little bit deeper. So a couple of things. So back in my days, we would animate in Maya, and then you render out um, Playblast and throw it into After Effects or Premiere or whatever, and you cut together a sequence, and then you render out a whole movie and you show it to the director. So I don't know what it's like these days because I haven't worked at these previous houses. But if I were to do it, you would throw in a mocap suit like one of those Xens or Rococo. So if you need to animate something, because that's obviously going to be quicker, you create a control rig character in Unreal that can be done fairly quickly. Apply the mocap, animate on top of it, animate the camera, all of that, and then you cut everything inside of Sequencer and you show it to the director. So now at this point, the director can say, "Whoa, that's cool. Except for this shot, I wish it was more like this instead of like this, and maybe about 10 frames longer." Before you'd have that, okay, sounds good. Go back to Maya, move the camera, render out the movies 10 frames longer, put in the After Effects or Premiere, adjust the timeline, re-render, and give it back to them. But now with Unreal, you're like, okay, go to Sequencer, move the camera up, add 10 more frames. Ta-da.
Yep, approval at your desk. And
Yeah,
then move on.
exactly. So I don't know if that's a question, but that's the answer.
I think so. That sounded good to me. Another question here, another very specific one. Do you know anything about BIM, the Building Information Module?
Yes, I've heard of it before.
Do you know if it's been converted to Unreal from other software? I
I do
have no
not.
idea. No. All right. Well, that was
But
an easy one.
my good buddy Google would probably know. But no, I don't
Cool.
know.
Well, there's a good answer as the person that asked it. Um, do you guys deal with any CG character performance in the VAD? It's a
N-
good question.
yeah, that's a good question because I do miss character work, but not too often. So most of the times that I've dealt with character performances or character work is for digital doubles, where we would have received the mocap data from when the director worked with the extras or whatever, and then we would just place them in. So we don't really animate the characters themselves, but me mostly so far that I've dealt with is has been with digital doubles, and that's pretty much it. And they do pretty mundane stuff in the background, just walking around, um, sitting, just idle movement. But I did deal with a little bit of a part where we had to trigger animated characters where they're standing around idle, and then the director would say, and then do this action, and then we would trigger it on the control box and the stage, so that the characters will go into some other animation, cheering, or like that's when he'll start walking or something like that. But I don't think it's at the fidelity where we can use it in Final Pixels quite yet. The Yeah, it's just not quite there, and it's not easy to coordinate all of those things. The triggering and the animation blending. The animation blending is just not quite right. If I were to do it, I would just know exactly what I wanted to do and just have it in the background instead of like blending from idle to something else to something else.
Is there a department that is called something that handles the animation, or is it just the animation department?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I guess just the animation department and
And
rigging.
are they generally animating in Maya still and then pulling the animation in as baked animation? Is any animation being done, as far as you're aware, using control rigs and that kind of thing?
As far as I'm aware, in because I deal mostly in the volume world with virtual content, um, there's not has not been a lot of needs for
Yeah,
character animation, except for these digital doubles. And with that, we all just use motion capture data.
right.
Yeah. But from what I
Unless
hear, I
it's
mean,
animals.
what's that?
What if it's animals?
Hey, you've seen some motion
I,
capture data from like dudes getting
are they still
extended
doing that?
limbs walking around.
Yeah.
Um, but I do see a lot of companies that makes full animated content using Unreal, using control rig that animates right inside the engine.
Mm,
So that exists, just not in my world.
right.
Yeah.
It seems like it's highly desirable, but people are still, most animators are versed in Maya,
Yeah.
so they're still bringing things in from.
But what do you think? Have you animated anything with control rig inside of Unreal, like character animation?
A bit, yeah. I mean, I'm not. I haven't spent tons of years doing character. I've done a lot of character animation, but I usually have. There's been other people who are actually good at it or fast at it. No, I'm pretty slow when it comes to
Yeah.
character animation, so haven't done a
But I
ton
just
of it.
wonder about.
I do like it. I think there's
Okay.
some things that it needs to, some improvements it needs to get animators to really love using it, like
Yeah.
being able to manage the mass of curves in the sequencer. It's just there's too many,
Okay.
or at least the keyframes. Being able to like manage that madness of having a whole control rig in. There
Right.
may actually be some. I've seen some improvements to what they've done in 5 to simplifying it, being able to show the hierarchy of the control
Hmm.
rig, which is pretty cool as like an outliner kind of thing. I think some of those things are going to continue to make it better. I've done some of it and I like it. Love the ability to be able to do it all in one program and not to jump out in and out between
Uh-huh.
programs too much,
Yeah,
in
I
theory.
was I was actually wondering about that, about the user experience of animating using control rig inside of Unreal. I haven't tried myself. It just seems a little bit clunky, but I don't know.
Yeah. I love the curve editor. I think it's really nice.
Yeah.
But the other parts of it I think are catching up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. But they've made some big improvements to it in 5.
Okay.
And you can see where it's going, I think, the modeling tool improvements and the
Yeah.
control rig improvements. It's trying to take over bits of Motion Builder's job and bits of Maya's job. And
Right. Right. What about
yeah,
the skinning? That's what they need to do next. I feel like.
there is a path to skinning in Unreal, but yeah, nothing really that anyone's using yet. But yeah, it needs that at some point as well. I feel
Because
like at some point that'll just appear.
yeah, and you can't create bones in Unreal, right? You have to create joints outside of.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, again, I don't know. Yeah, it's not really. If it does exist, it's not a robust
Uh-huh.
workflow yet. I don't think you can. I don't
Right.
think you can.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I don't. Some really cool stuff I think happening in Houdini in that respect as well.
Oh,
Some
okay. Well,
procedural joint building and procedural skinning and rigging even.
oh, that's cool. I need to take your Houdini class, by the way,
Yeah,
whenever I have free time, which
you're
means
welcome
never.
anytime.
So I won't be seeing you.
Coming soon, people. The
Yeah.
Houdini class is coming soon. Um, so we're almost at time, but I want to ask a couple more quick questions. Um, does VAD ever test out their assets by collaborating with Previz teams? Is Previz part of VAD or adjacent to VAD?
We
I
work
guess maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
we work closely with Previz. Previz and VAD actually work really closely together because so many times the VAD won't have the full design, but the Previz is already running forward with designing their shots, blocking out their sequences, and they need something. So they would block out some rough thing, per the script or some concept art, and then they would pass that back to us. And then, but that's already working in the sequence. So we would just have to work within that confine, or vice versa. Like if the VAD is already done with the asset, or far along, or even halfway done, we would pass it over to Previs just so they'll have something to work around for their sequence. So it's not the same department by any means,
Hmm.
but work very, very closely together. Yeah.
That's a really interesting question, I guess, because if the, as you said, they're working on some sense of this world and what happens in it. You're also doing the same thing. The art department's
Right.
doing the same thing. So you're all talking about the same thing. Something. So I guess something might originate in one of those three
Mhm.
places, and you're going to pass things between each other and at some point coalesce
Yeah.
to the
And
same
you know
truth
what? It almost becomes like whoever gets their stuff approved first.
first. Yeah,
Previous is
right.
approved, like, hey, this is golden, it's approved. Now you're just gonna make it stuff looks like ours.
So like each team's trying to make something cool and show it to the
Yeah,
supervisor first.
totally.
Yeah,
Because the previous artist loves making assets too. I mean, I feel like a lot of them do. They have ideas in their heads, and then yeah. But sometimes that used to drive me crazy. Working in the art department, the previous would start blocking stuff in, and all of a sudden they design this whole thing, and they give it back to us like, now you just make it look prettier. I'm like, dude, I was designing that whole thing, but
right.
they got to it first. So
That's cool. Yeah, really interesting. I've had similar experiences with that too.
yeah,
What some again asking what department does Previs fall under? The
previous
Previs
is its
department.
own department.
Right,
I mean, pre-production, I guess, but previous is their own department.
right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I'm going to squeeze in these last couple.
Yeah.
What about hard surface objects, animation like cranes, loaders? Does VAD deal with hard surface objects as well as
You know what? We do, yeah. And yeah, like mechanical stuff, like moving all of that. And a lot of times because my knowledge of control rig is limited, so a lot of times I would just do it in Maya and bake it out because I'm lazy to learn control rig. Because it's but yeah, I feel like that's it not often has it happen because sometimes we want to trigger certain things, but it has happened. I feel like that would be a useful thing for us to have. Yeah, but not super complex so far that I remember.
cool? Well, another very important question. Can you bring pets to work?
um Depending on who the pets, I guess. I don't think your pet alligator would be allowed, but I don't know.
Maybe a small dog, chameleon.
Yeah, yeah, a small dog. Yep, chameleon, eagles, timberwolf.
Another quick one, and then I'm gonna call this one. I go. This last question. Okay, so uh, if you had to pick, oh, we'll do two more. Okay, that's it. If you had to pick one aspect of Unreal to really master, what would it be?
I would say lighting.
Mm,
Yeah, I would say that because I don't know. Because I feel like you get biggest bang for the bucks if you know lighting really well. Because
yeah,
you can get awesomely pre-made assets. You just can't get awesomely pre-made lighting.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you always got to build that yourself.
Hmm.
Cool. Great answer. And the last one we're going to ask is the VAD team or VADs that you've been a part of, are they part of any guild, like Art Directors Guild, 800, etc.?
No, but no, none of them have because I feel like, and that's a big debate right now. I mean, I can get to it into it, but it's like, are we more VFX or are we more art department, right? Because
Mhm.
but they always treat us as more VFX, just because we use the computers. I don't know. So, but the guilds are trying to pull us away. Like I've heard talks of IATSE trying to shove the VAT underneath the art department guild. I don't know who makes those decisions or where it is at the moment, but I feel like we fall more into the VFX world than the traditional art department world.
Got it.
I wish it was the other way around.
You like to see some representation.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
cool.
That's
Well,
it. That's all the questions.
yeah, we got a lot of questions today.
I
Thanks
know.
to for sticking around and answering them, and yeah, thanks for joining us here. This has been awesome.
This has
Time has
been fun,
flown.
man. When are we doing part two? I'm just kidding.
Uh, no, I'd happily have you back anytime. Um, tomorrow, let's do it.
Tomorrow. All right. Sounds good. I still have
Um,
a bunch
I
more
still
questions for you.
good. Well, let's turn it around next time. And I still have a bunch of questions I didn't get to as well, so we'll definitely do that again. Is there anything that you want to share? Anything that you would like, any art station or anything you'd like people to follow you
Um,
on, or a movie that you're about to come out, or a book you're writing?
wow, you're putting a lot of pressure on me to do all these things.
Now you have to write a
Part
book.
two.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Mental notes, go write a book. So Ed won't shame
Yeah.
me in front of the world.
Yes. Exactly.
No, no, I'm not plugging anything. Just, being here, hanging out with you is reward in and of itself, man. Sitting around talking about this, I can sit around and talk about this all day long.
Fantastic. Well,
But I'm easily found on Instagram. Name's Punn. Not a lot of puns out there. So
two ends.
two ends. Yes.
Pun on
Yes, pun
Instagram.
intended.
Nice.
Yeah. Um,
So Instagram, check out Pun on Instagram.
yeah. I have
And
some funny drawings on there.
oh yeah, I remember I used to love seeing your drawings.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go check it out myself. Yeah,
Cool.
your
Not a
wacky
lot of
creatures.
not a lot of useful VAD knowledge on there. Just a lot of goofy drawings.
Well, the links have been shared already, so
Oh yeah.
yeah, happening in real time. That's how we do things these days.
Very cool. Thanks, man.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again. This has been fantastic. Thanks very much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. This has been so much fun. And I'll see you again soon. We gotta hook up in person one of these days.
Yeah, yeah, I look forward to it.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. All
And
right.
yeah, big thanks to all our listeners out there. Thanks for tuning in. We are CG Pro, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. And you can follow us at becomecgpro.com. I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.